do when I'm on scene, I'll be assuming Caroline Street Command. I got a 2.5-story wood occupied multiple dwelling. I got heavy fire from the second floor Charlie side. I have an exposure on the Delta side. We have one line stretch not in operation yet. Primary searches are underway. Status of the fire is doubtful. One passing command. I'm on the first line. Service speed advised. They're on scene. 2-story wood frame. I got heavy fire from the Alpha side.
Welcome back, fans of the Volley Chief. Another exciting episode coming your way. Today I have Robert, I'm going to say it right, Cobb, common spelling. That's it, Robert Cobb. He was a retired deputy chief from Jersey City Fire. He's got an extensive volunteer history. He's also, you correct me if I'm wrong, right? You're in the Firehouse Magazine Hall of Fame?
Yeah, a couple of years ago, yeah. And a lot of my stories come from that, work with Harvey Eisner and everybody for a number of years, yep.
Okay, and so go ahead, Robert, introduce yourself.
Okay, yeah, I think a lot of the people around the Jersey City area know me as Butch. I got stuck with that middle name, and as much as I tried to get rid of it, I couldn't, but anyway, yeah, I started my career as a volunteer in Dumont, New Jersey, back in, and nobody cringe when I say this, back in 1978.
I was born in 78.
Yeah, it just, you know, I got out of high school. I didn't want to go to college. I joined the Army in 67, went to Vietnam, 68, 69. And it kind of worked out. I got home and I always wanted to be a fireman. My dad was the chief in Dumont at the time. His uncle was a fireman in Lower Manhattan, you know, back in the 50s and 60s. Went over to visit. This got in my blood. So I came home and I realized that being a combat veteran, New Jersey does have a couple things that they did very well. And one of them was they have what's called Veterans Absolute Preference. So all I did was take the test. If I got a 70 or 72, didn't matter. Veteran goes to the top of the list. So that's kind of what's got me started. And I'd been a volley in Dumont for a couple of years. I had to be 21. That was the other thing. When I got out of high school, I was 18. You couldn't be a cop or a fireman until you were 21. You couldn't vote back then. But anyway, so, you know, I had the volley experience. You know, back then we went to, I can't even call it like basic fireman. We went to a course, you know, basic stuff. And so I had a little under my belt and then took the civil service test. I actually got on Weehawken, New Jersey first, which was just north of Jersey City. Did almost 3 years there, but it was 3 engines in a truck and a lot of pull boxes. But I knew I wanted to go to a big city. Took the New York City test, and then I took the Jersey City test, Newark. I wanted to go someplace, you know, if I was going to be a fireman, I wanted to be able to learn and do my job. So Jersey City came up in 75. I took that, and sort of the rest is history. Spent 34 years there, went up through the ranks, very fortunate, got to deputy chief. Was chief operations, which was the number 2 person in Jersey City for a few years towards the end of my career. But I had just a sensational career in Jersey City, and I stayed in the volleys in Dumont, and then I was there about 8 or 9 years. Became the chief in 78, and that was one of the best years really in the fire service I ever had. It was the beginning of the World War II guys kind of fading out and the younger guys coming in and really wanted to do more. And I was fortunate to be part of that. We added an engine in Dumont to the west side of the tracks. We had railroad tracks going through. And I was able to start the first rescue company in the history of Dumont. That was up in Engine 3, and it became Rescue 3. And one of the firemen there at the time was this young kid. His name was Mickey Comboy. He went on, he's Lieutenant Rescue 3 in the Bronx now. He went on to be one of the most decorated guys in New York City. So he was there when he was a kid. So I got to do those couple things. Bought a fire truck there. I like to tell the story, but I bought a Mack CF, $78,000.
Oh,
yeah, if you can believe that. That was 78, but yes, I was in Dumont for the 89 years while I was in Jersey City. When we had our first child, we moved up to West Milford, New Jersey, which was right on Greenwood Lake on the New York State border. And I said to my wife, I wasn't going to join, you know, working a second job. But of course, I had the scanner going. Every time something happened, I took off. And then finally she said, you might as well go join if you're going to leave the house. So I joined West Milford. That was a great experience too, but it was semi-rural. And coming from, you know, an urban area, like Dumont was great. Dumont was a couple miles square, had a couple of jobs a year, but the guys were modeled after the Bronx. It was just, you know, it just looked like you know, leather this and 3/4 boots. And so I go to West Milford, and one of the first drills I went to was on a folder tank, and I had no clue what they were talking about, but I learned drafting and all that, and it was I enjoyed it. And again, it was a lot of guys coming up from Bergen County and Passaic County up to the northern part of the state. The houses were a lot cheaper, and it kind of grew, and I became the chief in I think 85. Even though I told my wife I wasn't going to run for office, but they had a position called day chief. I became that for a little bit, and then chief of the district. Pretty big fire department. It had 6 companies. Each company had like 30. And West Milford Township was like 98 square miles. A lot of it was Newark watershed, but you know, tanker shuttles and whatnot. But I had a good run there for a long time. And then you know, I started a business. Well, I started working for Firehouse magazine, doing a lot of traveling with Harvey. I was kind of his sidekick, and I became the training coordinator for Firehouse Expo, the training coordinator for Firehouse World out in San Diego. And then we had another little thing going called Firehouse on the Road, where we brought smaller programs to different areas that didn't make it to the West Coast or to Baltimore. So I got kind of busy, and then I just had to fade away a little bit from the volleys, but it was a great experience, learned a lot up there. And you know, I started putting my heart and soul into studying in Jersey City. And again, I was just fortunate to walk through the ranks. So I did 34 years there. And then the last thing that happened to me that had something to do with the fire service was I was thinking about retiring from Jersey City, and I got a call from a company called Verist Analytics. And one of the companies under their umbrella was called the Insurance Services Office, or ISO. And they were looking for a fire chief, deputy chief, or somebody in higher rank to take over their program of grading fire protection in communities across the country. And they had never had that before. They had never had anybody from the fire service. So my name got thrown into the mix, and I got really lucky. And when was it? 2000? Oh boy, let me just think. I guess it was like 2000, maybe 19. No, 2009. I'm sorry. I took the position there, and I stayed there for like 5-6 years. Helped with a lot of other people rewrite the fire special rating schedule, which was kind of odd. Nobody liked it. No fire chief across the country liked it. So I convinced them, and with the fire protection engineers and some of the senior field reps, we adopted the NFPA standards, made it a lot simpler for everybody. So I did that for a little bit, then retired, and from that moved to Arizona. I've been out in Arizona for about 14 years. My wife was glad that we went to a city called Goodyear, which is just west of Phoenix. They belong to the Phoenix automatic aid system. There wasn't a volunteer fire department within 100 miles. My wife was really happy, but I still did a little work, little consulting work with them, and yeah, it brought us to here. I'm in Pittsburgh now, visiting my daughter and my son-in-law and my granddaughter. I'll be here for a couple of weeks, and then we'll head back. But that's kind of my story. Working with Harvey, I gotta have to preface some of my stories because I'm going to drop a lot of names, and I got people who say, "Oh, he's a name dropper." But you know what? When being in charge of hands-on training back in the I guess in the 80s, I met a lot of budding superstars, people like Johnny Salka, John Norman. I met Ray Downey, became good friends with him. a couple guys from LA County, some of the Florida USAR team, because they were the people that were coming with their programs. They wanted to do hands-on. So I got to know them, you know, got to watch their classes, and a lot of us stayed friends for all these years. You know, Johnny Salker and I, we talk twice a month. We get a kick out of looking at some of the programs that are out there and the instructors, and so, you know, as I go through this, it's just, I met a lot of just budding superstars that you know, went over the top. John Norman and you know, Mike Bryan out in LA County, and just all over the country. So anyway, I just had a really blessed career. I was always in the right spot at the right time, got to meet the right people, started my own training company just before the federal government started giving everybody money for training and manpower. But yeah, it was crazy, because I had about four or five guys from Jersey City and a couple other places working for me. We travel all over the Northeast. You know, we went down to Myrtle Beach a couple times, and then we got the call and do something out in LA County. But I wound up, some of the jobs I did, I had 15 people working for me, because the chief would come to me and say, hey, I got a vacant school, they're gonna knock it down, do anything you want to. So we did a lot, but we did a lot, but it was all based on surviving the Fireground. That was the name of the company, Fireground Survival LLC. And it was all the guys that worked for me had to be experienced. If you didn't have experience, you weren't going to come work for me, other than maybe, you know, roll holes or something or clean equipment. But I made sure everybody that we traveled with was well experienced, and it worked out really well. And then, just when I thought we were doing really well, the federal government started giving out money, and I had fire chiefs calling me up. Back then, you had to use the money, training money, in a year, otherwise you got audited, and if you didn't spend it, you had to give it back. But I had chiefs. It started something I didn't particularly like, but I had fire chiefs call me and say, hey, can you do a program in my department? We got about 60 guys, 3 shifts, blah, blah, blah. And I said, oh, okay. So I write it up and give it to them. And I said, give me 4 or 5 guys from each shift. I'll do a trainer. You know, I have the booklet I'll give them the videotapes and everything. And he says, no. He goes, I want you to do each group. And I said, that means I got to do it 3 times. And he says, yeah. He goes, I said, that amount on a piece of paper is going to triple. So, but they had the money, and I did that several times. We did 3 groups, because you could pay for the overtime out of the training budget. And then we hit some fire departments that had 4 shifts, and we did it 4 times. And we all complained, but you know what? When the money rolled in, the guys were pretty happy. So yeah, we did that for a while. We enjoyed the hell out of that. Did a lot of hands-on at different conferences. And then
now, can we talk about the ISO? Because
yes.
Okay, so you know, I've been a fire chief in 2 different volunteer departments.
Yep.
And I feel like for a lot of volunteers, it's like this mystical organization that we know. You know, I mean, I know at one time, like, I even had a hard time trying to find out what my ISO rating was.
Yep.
So, you know, can you talk a little bit about that, and you know, as a volunteer, what you could do to either help yourself and your score, and how to kind of work that game? Because again, you know, I think it's one of those things that a lot of departments, especially the volunteer departments, think that they don't have the time or the manpower to invest in it.
Yeah, but you know, they do it. And believe me, Dave, I felt the same way. I never bothered with them when I was the chief in Dumont or in West Milford. And when I was in Jersey City, I knew a little bit about them, because there were actually a couple test questions on promotional exams about them. And they came into Jersey City with an experimental program called Big City Gradings, because the big cities with a lot of fires didn't have to be graded, because the fire protection engineers and the actuarial people could grade them by the amount of fires they had and the amount of money the insurance companies paid out for fires. If you kind of understand it's really, that's what it comes down to. If you had a good fire department and it was a house fire, and you put it out real quickly, you could get graded pretty good. And if you didn't, your grade was not as good, and the people that lived there might have paid a little bit more for their homeowners insurance on the fire protection side. But anyway, so they came in, and my chief, Rick Eggers, the one we were on a job with, he was one of the best chiefs ever in Jersey City. He came to me, and I was studying for different tests. I think I was a captain at the time. And he said, listen, I want you to, be in charge of that, the work days. And I said, all right. So, but I didn't understand them, and I actually didn't like them. I gave them a hard time at the beginning, but these guys came in, a lot of them were volunteer firemen, and they explained everything to me, and I followed them around, and I couldn't believe how much data they collected. They looked at the fire protection engineers would look at it and throw it into their formula, but I couldn't believe how much they gave back to my fire department that we didn't know. And I said to myself, holy cow, this is a good deal. And here's the other thing, Dave, it was free. And when they left, they gave us this booklet, they called it. It had everything about our fire. Now, one of the things I have to correct myself and anybody that listens to this, they don't grade your fire department. They are grading the protection in your community. It's the fire department, it's communications, it's water. It's even, they look at the building stock, how many frames, and things like that. It's really a comprehensive look under the covers in your community. So they grade the community. You could have a great score with the fire department and get a bad ISO score because communications wasn't good or water wasn't good. And so I always remind fire chiefs, don't say they're coming in to grade the fire department. Go to the mayor, and say they're coming in to grade our protection for the community. It just sounds better. So, with that, like I said, we went to the NFPA, followed the NFPA instead of their own rules. And, right off the top, again, I've done a lot of consulting, but as non-compensated. I've done some consulting for some friends, the city of Phoenix, a couple fire departments in LA. But if these chiefs helped me while I was ISO and they called me, I would go back and I do some consulting for them for like I say, non-compensated. But the three things that from a fire chief's point of view is, and when you get the most points, staffing, training, and what they call deployment, and how soon you get there and how many fire trucks get there. So they're the three things if I'm a fire chief that I want to look at. Then there's fire prevention. There's other things in there, but the three places or the three areas that you can get the most points are staffing, training, and deployment. And really, when you look at it, ISO has data from insurance industries and from the fire service themselves going back years and years and years and years. And when you look at it, the best example I could give you, if you had two identical houses that caught fire, and if one fire department showed up with 10 guys and the capability to flow, 4,000 gallons of water, and some of these things I'm just throwing out, and the house got damaged, and the insurance company had to pay out, let's say, $75,000. And that same house in the fire department, it sent 4 engines, 2 trucks, 25 firefighters, good training, good water, and put the fire out quicker. And the insurance company would pay out $10,000. So that's kind of how I look at it from how I look at it really at the bottom line. It's the insurance industry that started ISO, and they want to know who is good at putting out a structure fire and who wasn't. And in between good and bad is a numbering system, 1 to 10. 1 being the best, or the fire department that has the really good water, has good communications, good training, good staffing, and can get fire trucks deployed and on the scene in the NFPA timeframe. So you know what? If I became a fire chief tomorrow, the first thing I would do is find out what my grade is, and I'd work on it, because so many fire chiefs were afraid to have them come in, and more times than not, the reason why they didn't get the grade they should have got was because they didn't have documentation. And ISO needs the documentation. They are not the ISO police that people used to call them. They come in and they ask for the data. They expect the water department to do testing on some of the hydrants in the commercial areas. And it's a pretty simple procedure. Doesn't cost you anything, and it gives you this great outlook of your fire department. And you could take that and plan, this is what I want to do 6 months from now. This is what I want to do from a year from now, because you can call them back anytime you want. I'll give you a quick example. The city of Phoenix, I always thought that the center of the universe in the fire service was Phoenix. Brunacini was there, Chief Brunacini was there, and they did everything correctly. Well, they were a class 2. And after Chief Brunacini left, after he passed away and he left, they had their first, I can't think of her name, the first woman fire chief. Oh boy. When you get old, you forget names. But anyway, she called me, the staff called me and said, you told the chief before me that if we ever need any help, you'd come. Because they helped me, we kind of partnered with the Metro Fire Chiefs Conference in Phoenix, and they gave me a big stake in that. So I went back and I found it was documentation. It wasn't, they had everything. They just didn't, you need the numbers. You need, for example, fire prevention. If you reached out to, an eighth of the population, well, when I looked at it, they actually reached out to 50% of the population, but they didn't, they just go and correlate, for example, giving out fire prevention material on a college campus and things like that. So it was documentation, and in other departments, the training documentation was terrible, and we could only go by what they gave us. And so, again, if I was a fire chief, I would call them because they give you a nice plan. And I know we use it in Jersey City. We had a 5-year plan to go from a class 3 to a class 1, because it doesn't happen overnight. And we worked on it, we worked on it. And finally, under Chief Steve McGill, they got their class 1, but it took some time and effort. And, but things like training, it doesn't cost you anything to add a couple hours to each firefighter's training. It doesn't cost you a lot to add a fire. Instead of sending 2 engines in a ladder truck to a fire, send 3. And some chiefs say, "Oh no, what if we have another fire?" And I would say to them, "Well, when's the last time you had 2 fires at the same exact time?" And generally they would say, "Well, none that I can remember." So I mean, it just, getting 4 or 5 more firemen to the fire, sitting in the firehouse, and yes, so there are some simple things. I mean, and then there's the complicated things where your community expands, and the firehouses go more than 5 miles from a fire station. Now that's kind of an insurance standard. If you're, and the numbers prove out, if you're more than 5 miles from a fire station, by the time you get there, the way things
there's not much left.
Yeah. So
I can tell you, a couple of years ago, before I left Bridgeport, they were, one of the things that they were very hot on, as you mentioned, on our ISO rating, was training. And the underlying problem was that we were coding our training wrong. And and again, obviously you're more of the subject matter expert on this one than me, but you have to do so many hours of training in so many topics, and it has to be, as you said, documented a specific way. And that was something that we were, getting hit on, because, so for example, if I remember correctly, you need like 12 hours of officer development a year. Well, they would, we would have it, but they wouldn't document it as officer development. They would document it, as something different. So when they switched computer programs, the training division and one of the battalion chiefs, who was my chief, that's how, the only reason I know about this, Chief Cronin, he was, he only created the categories in the computer system to align with the ISO ratings. Because the other problem we had was, typical, I hate to say city fire department where you had a lot of different people in there, we would go do forcible entry training. And like I would go back and code it into the computer as forcible entry training, and like another guy would go and code it as tool familiarization.
Right.
And like when, in order to like you said, it was a simple paperwork problem. They basically created the categories in the computer system to match the ISO requirement. So like you couldn't, put in that you were doing training if you couldn't get the category that it went to. And that was a big part of our ISO rating.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that they never allowed, but they finally allowed me to, I sat down with some of the, the companies that were making the computer programs, and it kind of explained it to them. And most of the systems that are out there now have all the ISO categories, and they're easy to see. And and before that, it was really hard. But there were things like if you did a training with your jaws, that's considered something for structural firefighting. Now, this is the other part of it. They're only concerned, ISO is only concerned with structural firefighting, commercial, residential. They don't count car fires, brush fires, EMS calls. What they do is they grade fire protection only in houses and stores and factories. So it's strictly that. And that's why the fire departments would have a drill on jaws, and they wouldn't put that down but they didn't know that, if you had a commercial building, you had to force an overhead, you use the jaws to do that, to get in to put the fire out. So if you're using the set of jaws, that training goes under structural firefighting. There's things like that just, without really doing a deep dive, you just didn't know. But
and that's a common problem too in volunteer departments, is that I think they fail to document a lot of training. And I think it's because we have, the part of the volunteer world where I'm from, which it's usually the same, across the country, you have like your drill night, right? So, like for us, it's Thursday night. And that's something usually when you get a bunch of volunteers together, right? You have that conversation where I'll say to you, so what night do you guys meet? And every Thursday night we would do our training. Well, what happens on a Sunday morning when four guys are talking about the fire that they had the night before? Or, on a Tuesday afternoon when a couple guys happen to be there, and one of the new guys said, hey, can you show me how to start that saw? None of that would get logged. You would only,
Yep.
right.
It all is. Yep.
You would only get training reports on, Thursday. If you look in, again, you look in whatever software you're using, Firehouse, and you look at training, you'd only see the training thing Thursday night. And that was something that I found is like a difficult nut to crack. And recently up in summers, I created task books, and I gave all the interior firefighters 25 tasks that I wanted them to do over the next 6 months. And it was stretch a line, do a primary search. But I explained to them, this doesn't need to be done on our normal Monday night. If you're Saturday afternoons, if 5 of you are sitting around, then you take one of the rigs out and go practice pumping. Or a couple of guys are hanging out and you start talking about knots, and one of the guys throws you some rope and says, all right, let's do some knots. You got to document that.
Yeah, that was, across the country, documentation was always a problem. And, I looked into that, and that's why I wanted to get together with these companies that were putting out, a program that you can put into your computer. I wanted to make sure that and I just thought of my own history. And when I was in Dumont, they were doing drills all the time, and they would put it in a book and put it in a drawer. When I went to West Milford, it was the same thing. And we just check off who was at the drill Monday night. Monday night was our drill night. Sunday would come in if you could to clean the equipment. But even coming in and cleaning the equipment, that's a drill. That's an hour, whatever it is, that's counted. And the other thing that we started traveling. The field reps were going around the country asking chiefs, hey, we want to come and explain what we're doing. Could you get the surrounding towns? So we started going to different chiefs organizations and having the field reps and myself, I enjoyed that going out. They allowed me to go to conferences. I never went to conferences before. I was going to the FDIC, Firehouse Magazine, the Northern California Training Chiefs Association. I was going to all them with a couple field reps explaining. So once we got the word out, it really started to work a lot better. And it's just good for your department. It makes you better. And here's the other thing, and this has always been the unknown. And the chief would say to me, well, if I go from a 5 to a 3, how much money is my community going to save? And I don't have that answer. That is something that the data that the fire protection engineers and others at ISO, the data, how they put it into the computer, and it's a series of formulas. They push that data out to the insurance industry, and they use that number, the numbers that come out of there. They use that to grade. Now every state in the U.S. Has to have a state insurance commissioner by law, and a state insurance commissioner has to okay everything ISO does. So if they make any changes, it's got to go to every state insurance commissioner, and it has to be okayed. So it's not like they can make things up. They have to it has to be signed off by the state insurance commissioner. So it's really all, it's all really good. But yeah.
So if I was looking to improve my ISO, the first step would be to reach out to ISO.
Yeah, reach out to the regional field manager. If you have questions, they'll send the field rep. He could go over with you. I know that yeah, they'll come and help you. They want you to be better. They want you to be better. It just if it's documentation, if it's the deployment of your apparatus, if you're so many fire departments. I'm going to kind of be all over the place here, but so many fire departments that I would go out. I was kind of learning myself, but I get invited out by chiefs associations, and I do a big program from. Then I would go to the individual departments. I'd spend an extra day or two, and I forgot what I was going to say, but
We were
a lot
talking.
of them would say, yeah, but you know what? As soon as we have a fire, we get mutual aid. We get like 3 more engines in the truck, and I said mutual aid counts for 0. All right. What you have to have is automatic aid, and I have pushed that all over the country. Automatic aid is a way of getting extra points in manpower and in deployment, the 2 of the 3 biggest point getters. And I saw that in Arizona with the Phoenix Fire Department. All the communities out there, I think there's 40 or 50 of them, they're all under one dispatcher. They all respond. What they do is they pick the closest fire truck and they go. So I've been to a couple of fires when I moved out there in Goodyear, where there'd be only a Goodyear engine and truck, and then the next 3 engines would come from Glendale and Phoenix, and the deputy would come from South Phoenix. There's 3 deputies working, I think, in Phoenix. So it was. Now, automatic aid means that you all can talk on the radio, you all train together. You all understand each other's operations, and when you have automatic aid, whatever comes, you get points for like they were yours, sort of. But that's
that's good to know for me, because
yeah.
my town does not have a ladder truck, but we have a regional dispatch center. And as soon as we get banged out for anything, a box, I can say that to you. This is the lingo.
Yeah.
If we get banged out on a box, they're automatically coming. They're on the same radio frequency as us. We train with them, and I never knew that counted because of
absolutely. You get the apparatus gets counted, the equipment on it gets counted, and the personnel on it gets counted. 3 big things. And everywhere I went, I said automatic aid is the answer to. It's the answer not only to ISO, it's the answer to better fire protection in the entire country. Now, I come from the Northeast in Hudson County, New Jersey, and if we dared to cross the line for a fire, you'd probably get suspended. Politically, you couldn't you couldn't be first or second due in Union City, the next town above us, smaller department. You couldn't be first or second due there. You could only go there after they got there and called because they needed you. It was a political thing. None of the mayors, none of the politicians wanted another fire department getting to their fire first. It was absolutely ridiculous, but I could never, I just couldn't get anybody to believe it, at least in that area. But
Yeah, see, where I'm from, the part of Connecticut I'm from, it's very small, tight group of small cities.
yeah,
And I mean, for as long as I could remember, for example, Shelton, which is our neighboring city, we're automatic response for their downtown area. So like even where I am in Connecticut, that's nowadays even more so.
yeah,
You're going right off the rip. As you know, with the decline of volunteers,
yeah.
where that
Well,
that yeah, you're seeing that much more now.
yeah, it just kind of makes sense. Forget about ISO. Wouldn't you want the best fire protection to get there as soon as they could for search and rescue, for putting out the fires so it doesn't extend, regardless of where the fire trucks come from? And I'll tell you, I see it more and more out west. When I work with the Western Fire Chiefs Association, that's the 10 Western states. They sort of hated ISO at the time, but I went out there and I work with them. We got everything under control. But I see a lot of automatic aid out there, and I brought it back to the Eastern Fire Chiefs. Every place I went, I talked about it, and it just, from a political standpoint, it's still in some places it's still kind of hard. But yeah, you know what? It's just it's kind of a no-brainer. Two things: it's the best protection for your community, because how many communities have a firehouse in the adjoining community closer than theirs?
Correct. I
Lots
mean,
of places.
even when I sit at home, the neighboring town's firehouse is at the end of my street. It's literally
Yeah,
a quarter of a mile away from me. But the closest firehouse in my hometown, I mean, they automatically respond. It's not at all a turf war. But like you said, like the civilian whose house is on fire doesn't
yeah.
really care what the name is on the side of the big red truck. They just care that it's there.
They want the closest fire truck. Yeah, and so I got to push that. And there were a lot of places that I would go to that went to that. I feel kind of good inside of me that that I got them the better fire protection than they had. It just it just makes sense, and it's it's you get two things. You get better fire protection. You might get a better score. I know that one of the examples they used, I think it was San Antonio, Texas. Again, we're going back a ways, but they were in budget trouble. They were going to cut millions of dollars from the fire budget. They were going to do some manpower from 4 to 3. They were going to close fire stations, brown them out. And the union called me. Now, I couldn't, because of my position, I couldn't work with the union. I just said to them, they wanted to know how much. They were a class 2, and they told me everything that was going to happen. And I said, well, let me talk to some of the people. There was a chance they could drop from a 2 to a 3 or a 4 or even a 5, depending on how bad the cuts were. But I couldn't tell them what the loss was going to be. So the union went out and went to all the insurance companies and said, what if this happens with, and bottom line was when they took the numbers from the insurance companies in their community, it was good. The taxpayers were going to get an increase in their homeowners insurance on the fire side that amounted to more than the cuts that we're going to make. And it was big headlines and whatnot. And when the mayor and council looked at it, you know what they did? They didn't cut the budget of the fire department, because they cut the budget for the fire department by $2 million. It's a fairly big sized city. All the people, houses, apartments, stores, commercial buildings, they would have been paying like another $4 million in what I call the hidden tax, because their insurance would have went up. And when the mayor and council saw so that's one of the examples I used. And that was, not many of them around, but I can tell you, I know at Jersey City, they went from a 3 to a 1. If somebody did some legwork with all the commercial buildings they have, and the population has grown to over 300,000 now in 14 square miles. And If somebody did their homework, they would see that a lot of these places would probably, um, saving millions and millions of dollars when you look at it that way. And the other thing ISO did for Jersey City, they sent different types of field reps, but they sent some field reps to look at a lot of the commercial buildings, and they found about 25, 30 commercial buildings that has sprinkler systems but hadn't been tested. And if they hadn't been tested and passed, that building, the insurance company was allowed to charge them a rate the same as if there was no sprinkler system in the building, because they didn't know if it worked. So ISO found this, they gave it to me, I gave it to the fire prevention department, and they contacted all the owners of these commercial buildings, and some of them was sublet, sublet, but a lot of the owners had the system tested, brought ISO back in, and just saved them. That's one of the good letters we got back from a whole bunch of commercial building owners saying, you saved me thousands of dollars by getting they didn't know that the sprinkler system didn't work or hadn't been inspected. So that's something, another hidden value, I should say, of ISO. And like I said, getting that booklet at the end, and it's free. I mean, how many people come into your department, ask you to do some work? I mean, they're going to ask for some data. They may pull a couple things out, and let me check this. They may look at some of the apparatus, but it's not like it was in the old days where they'd spend like a week there chasing you around. It's different now because of the computers and whatnot. But there's great value in that. When anybody ever calls me, I said, yeah, absolutely, I get it done. And I just had a fire department in Northern Arizona, a pretty big department, call me. I think they were a class 3, and a fairly new chief. And he said, what can we do? And I said, well, number one, I said, you can call the field rep and talk about the things that you don't think, because you see the grading. It says, like, for staffing, you could get like 40 points, but maximum, but your department got like 12 points. Well, find out why that is. What missed, and but what I do, if somebody calls me, what I do is I look at their ISO evaluation, and I look at 3 things. I look and see where they can get points and spend no money, where they can get points spending a little bit of money, and then where you can get points like add 2 companies, build a firehouse, buy another fire truck, the highest. And they're surprised when I show them that little or no cost, just simply by staffing, deploying better, and automatic aid. So
now I mean, obviously it's difficult for a lot of, I know, like you said, like a lot of volunteer chiefs have this fear or this difficulty that it's going to be a massively long process and it's going to take a lot of time, and I thank you for definitely making it sound much easier than I think a lot of people think it is.
absolutely, and it's not a long, drawn-out process anymore. And here's the other thing: when ISO comes in, when they get done, the report goes to the highest official, whether it's the mayor or business administrator. It goes to the fire chief. It goes to the head of the water department. But they generally work through the fire department, and getting these reports out. And the fire chief usually sets up ISO with grading the water department, and the fire chief may help ISO getting introduced to the communications people. So that's what made people think that it's grading the fire department, and it's not. I mean, it's 3 separate issues. Plus, like I said, the buildings, how many sprinkler buildings you have, high rises that are sprinklered, the taller buildings, the high rises with sprinkler systems, they actually can get their own grade. You could be a class 3 and a building could be a class 1, depending on the fire protection. So there's a lot goes into it, but it's not this long drawn out process anymore. It's actually been simplified. And I would just advise any chief, what do you have to lose? I mean, if you're a 5 or 6 or 7, there's this fire department up in Northern California. They were, I think, a 3/10 That means in the areas where there's hydrants, in the area where the firehouse is within 5 miles, in the areas where they can deploy, there are 3. But they have a lot of houses because it's scenic up in the mountains, more than 5 miles from a firehouse, no water. And there are 10, which means those people are going to pay a really high rate for their fire insurance and their homeowners policy. But that's just the way it is. I mean, that's why ISO is a 310. They wouldn't say your whole town's a 10. They divide it up.
They divide it up.
Yeah, divide what's good and what's not. And you know, I was part of they never graded New York City because, again, New York City was one of those cities that had so many fires that they could do it statistically.
Right.
But then as the fires dropped, they decided the insurance industry and ISO decided they wanted every fire department, you know, under their umbrella graded. So when they said to me, listen, we want to do New York City, you know, I said, well, that's good. I said, you know, and the only thing that happened with that is they had so much data, it wouldn't fit into our computer system. They had to make some changes, you can imagine. But I actually went over for the first meeting to speak to the chief and the fire commissioner. Sal Casano at the time was the chief. Boy, and they brought us in with open arms. And the biggest problem we had was getting water data. They were like, I think it took somebody from the mayor's office to call them and say, hey, let these guys in. Not quite like that, but New York City wasn't a class 1, believe it or not, with you know, 11,000 firemen and all those fire stations. But again, documentation and things like that. But they, you know, they became a class 1, and but they had to document everything, make a couple changes, and so it's big or small, it doesn't matter. I mean, there are a few volunteer fire departments, believe it or not, that are class 1s, but it takes a lot, and it takes things like you know, guys throwing in a night or doing a night shift or a day shift or a 24-hour shift. But that's not the biggest part of it. I mean, you could be a volunteer fire department and be a class 2 or 3. I mean, be, you know, those top 3 spots. There's lots and lots of volunteer fire departments that hold a 2, 3, and a few out there that are class 1. So it's not impossible. Just how much time and effort you want to put into it. And like I said, the better your grade is the better chance of people saving a couple bucks, and just knowing you're a better fire department. You know, if you can get there faster, and you know, the hardest thing when I first went there with deployment analysis, how are we going to do that? I mean, there's a manual way to do it through the NFPA, which is really a little time consuming, but now there's computer programs. You put in your data from the communications, you know, when did the call come in? And here's the thing, that part of it is when the phone rings, when you dial 911 to report a fire and the phone rings and you're in a computer system, the computer will say how long it took to answer the phone. That's part of the scheme of things. That goes down that gets documented. And how long does it take to get the call into the firehouses? How long does it take for the guys to turn out? And one of the biggest problems is if it's a volunteer fire department, you obviously can't give you the same credit to a volunteer department responding that you could from a career department. It's pretty simple. And fire chiefs used to yell at me all the time. Oh, we get there really quick. The guy lives down the block. But it's still, if you're a volunteer department, you got to wait for the, I used to say plectron, but nobody knows what a plectron is anymore.
You gotta get a crystal.
Yeah, when your pager goes off, you're still gonna drive to the firehouse, you gotta wait for a crew, and then get out the door, where the career department's there already. So right. they obviously they're gonna get a much better credit for getting out and part of the deployment than a volunteer department. It's just, you know, it comes down to almost like, for every a career department, if they got a 1 for their getting out of the firehouse, the volunteers would start off with a 3, because you know, the data is just going to show you can't get out, and that's one of the drawbacks. But you know what? It still didn't stop some volunteer departments from getting really good grades. You know, so
now, Chief, I love this. I usually like to keep the show around the 45-minute mark.
Yeah.
We're definitely getting there. But what I'd like to ask is if if you'd come back on, if we could do this again.
Sure, yeah, because I'd like to talk a little bit, some of the other programs I do, on I have a different look at leadership. I started a few years ago, I started doing some programs on mental health. I've written a couple articles for New York State Chiefs. I've been through PTSD. After I got back from Vietnam, I had a really life-threatening incident in Jersey City as the last man taken out of a burning chemical factory when I thought everybody was out. But I got last 3 or 4 years, I kind of opened up about that. It was a secret in my life, but I opened up about it and how I handled that. And I've done quite a few programs for the New York State Chiefs and other places. So yeah, I'd like to talk about some of the other things. Because I got like 50 years in the fire service, even though but I appreciate this, Dave. I'd come back anytime.
Excellent. Yeah, I definitely want to have you back on. And the ISO thing kind of just popped up, and it was something I was thinking of. So I thank you for taking the time. We're definitely gonna have you back soon. We'll do a round 2. So thank you for being here. And as always, everyone, don't forget to smash that like and subscribe button. Feed the machine, which helps people follow me. And that's all for tonight. Thank you very much for joining us on the Volley Chief.
Thanks, Dave.
FD1's back in service. Commands terminated.